Okay, I'm joined today by John O'Brien. For those that don't know John, he is deep in the clean tech sector of Australia. He's a partner, amongst other things, a partner at Deloitte in energy transition and decarbonisation, also co-founder of the Climate Leaders Coalition, as well as an author, a founder of Visions to 2100. And I think you've got 2 books out at the moment, and that's something I'd love to chat to you about maybe another time. But just for anyone that's curious, as I understand it, the idea is to pick a vision in the future, is about where we want to be, and then develop the path going forward. So yeah, that's just come out recently. So congratulations on that front. But we know John. We know you from the National Cleantech Conference and Exhibition, which you've been a huge supporter of since its inception a few years ago. And in fact, you'll be speaking on a couple of things I think we're talking about at the next one in Feb. You've just come back. You're down in London now. You've just been at COP for a couple of weeks. So I thought I'd check in on you on the clean tech front and get your thoughts on that. So first question to you, 3 questions. The first one is, what was the most exciting clean tech you saw at COP?
So the book's all about backcasting. So the stories are told from the future, looking back of what happened. So most exciting technology. So I mean, COPs are amazing events in that in the space of 2 days you'll speak to the person who's going marching with Greta and the angry environmental activist who's been doing it for 20 years. And the Minister of Energy for some European country, and the CEO of an airline, which happened in 2 days last week, and just what an amazing place. In terms of the early stage technologies, there's not actually that many of them there. They're probably a little bit more mature. But what we're seeing is kind of all the technologies I've worked with over the 20 years I've been doing this. We're now really seeing them starting to bite. So it's there was a lot of talk about direct air capture. That's there was really thinking quite deeply about that. And
sorry, what's the purpose of that?
So basically drawdown. So how do we suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere?
Yep.
And it's quite hard to do it cost effectively. It's not hard to do it. It's hard to do it cost effectively, but increasing kind of concern that we're not going to stop emitting enough in time, so we're actually going to have to start pulling some out. So there's some interesting stuff around that. And the Australian company Mineral Carbonisation International, MCI, has got lots of coverage in the paper, and they so did a great job, and she was there. But there was also lots of really interesting technologies around sustainable aviation fuels that I came across, and some companies out of the Americas on that. So just lots of really interesting things, and I think where the ones that are flying solve the hard to abate problems. The heavy industry. Whether it's steel or cement or chemicals or aviation, and that's where I think the ones I saw that seemed most interesting and most promising were coming through. There's obviously lots more, but those are the ones that were.
Yeah, so it sounds like those that are maybe taking a more pragmatic course of mitigation of existing industries rather than just doing 180 as to how we exist.
Yeah, and I mean it's also the conversations around with the big companies on how they're starting to look at how do they evolve, and what are their new business lines, and everything from the oil companies to the miners to the big industrials, and the the solution providers like Schneider and Siemens. They're obviously there with lots of high tech gear, and they're very much looking for the new niches to deliver virtual power plants or demand response or bioenergy type projects. So there's and again, I mean, I guess how could I not talk about hydrogen, because everyone in Glasgow was, but it's there's lots and lots of talk about hydrogen, but also some of that is again starting to think a bit more commercially and pragmatically around, okay, so which use cases are going to use hydrogen, and then how is the infrastructure going to be built, and actually some of the practicalities of we are going to need a lot of hydrogen. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But for what use cases? No, it's not everything. We're not going to be driving hydrogen commuter cars, but we will be using hydrogen for some of the things that we can't abate in any other way. So lots of talk about that as well. It's kind of it's a mind-boggling couple of weeks with all sorts of things.
It's a big event. Yeah. Hope you took lots of notes. So the continuing on the theme of Cleantech, was there a message? Was there a message that resonated? I guess that promoted the advocating the adoption of clean technologies.
Yeah. So I think the headline message. I've been looking at the Australian newspapers, but it's the same in the UK as well. The headline message is all about. It's kind of which prime minister and which president is there, and what have they said, and who did they not speak to. So a bit of town gossip. The other headline at the end was about, but it didn't say phased out, it said phased down. It's kind of like big hoo-ha about, India started that and who supported and who didn't. To some extent, that's all irrelevant. None of that actually has any relevance to what's happening in business, for big business, and actually all the clean tech providers who are going to be supplying big business. And the things that were more important, in my view, were the agreement. So that's the 195 countries, signed the final thing. There's agreements with, sort of 40 or 50 or 100 countries, which signed up to stop using coal in rich countries by 2040, stop financing coal, from the next few years, reduce methane emissions by 30% by 2030, which I think actually is going to be really important for Australia, and it's pushed towards gas. So that's going to sort of deflate that a little bit. Stopping deforestation by 2030, massive. And then the sort of thing like the partnership between China and the US, and then India finally sort of announcing a net zero target, and that sort of thing. So there's massive change happening. And actually, the biggest change of all, which will again flow all the way down to all the great companies that come along to your event, is the GFANZ, so the Glasgow Financial Alliance on Net Zero. So that has over 450 of the world's biggest finance companies in there, all the banks, all the financial institutions, and there's varying levels of engagement, but they have all undertaken to decarbonize their investment portfolio. So all the lending and all the equity and everything that goes out the door will be decarbonized, and they're going to then have 2030 targets, and that's then going to flow through to the cost of capital to every company in the world, and that's going to drive those companies to go, okay, what we need is a lower emissions solution, and that's where solution providers that we work with come in, because that's going to drive the big mining companies, the big industrials, the big everything, to go, right, what technologies exist? What are they? How can we get them up to speed? How do we deploy them quickly? Because otherwise my cost of finance is going to go up and my bank is going to start charging me more. And that has significant impacts on the financing of companies. So that will drive kind of a even stronger view of the value of clean tech and the growth of the sector.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned that the criticism, obviously, there's been coverage probably, and maybe it's the natural bias of the news channels to focus on that. But it seems if you scratch the surface, there is a lot to be positive about. And I know you're an avowed optimist, and which is a positive thing to be. Something I try to emulate. But I guess I wonder, in the face of that criticism, which is very public. And it seems you've got to make more of an effort to find the positives and face that sort of criticism. I mean, do you see that having an impact on the clean tech sector in any way?
No, I don't think so. Because it's industry that's driving it. And so there was one really great dinner I went to with Nicholas Stern, so Lord Nicholas Stern, as he is now, who did the Stern report back in 2006, and that was for the first really kind of extensive view of the economics of climate change, and looking at the cost to act now as opposed to the cost to act later, and set out a very strong course. And he's still a sort of a very eminent economists. And the two things he was saying around this COP was, Paris was the commitment COP. That's great. This is the delivery COP. This is actually where we have to, the rubber hits the ground. We've got 8 years now to get to 2030. We need to reduce our emissions globally by 45% to be anywhere near on track. And we have to do that in 8 years, which is just massive transition. But the other thing he said was that and having been to most of them, I should think, it's the first COP he's seen where government's role is not the primary role. Government it's business and finance are driving the agenda now. Government's coming along, and it's actually still a really important part, because the transition is going to happen anyway. Finance and industry is actually going to drive that, and the community. Government's role is to make it a bit more orderly. And it's going to happen regardless. And if but if government has a role there to make sure that everyone's brought along, and there's no one's left behind, and there's not too much overzealous capitalism going on. But it is industry that's driving it. So the criticism on the front page of the paper, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure it has that much impact, because the big companies still have their AGMs, and the AGMs are getting harder and harder on climate. So they need to have targets, they need to have solutions, they need to be doing things. And who cares what it says on the front page?
I guess it could conversely, I suppose, even have a positive impact if people don't think that someone else is going to do it for them. Then potentially they're more motivated to do something about themselves, and certainly consumer power has been a growing thing in the last few years, and that could be a real force, I think. Yep,
no, I'd agree with that. So, and it's, awesome. I mean, it's so interesting, and we may have said before when we've been chatting, but it's kind of looking at when are the supply chains, when are they going to get to be net zero? When are the end customers going to demand that a whole supply chain becomes net zero? So, I know Lion Brewers are looking at having carbon neutral beer, because they know that, for the same price, there will be an increasing number of millennials who will choose to have the carbon neutral beer, and probably old people like us. But if it tastes the same and it's the same price, so why wouldn't you? When is the first carbon neutral electric vehicle going to roll off the production line in Germany? And everything in that vehicle, from the iron ore out of the mine, through all the transport, all the product, all the steel, all this glass, when's that? I reckon that's 2025. Someone will buy the first carbon neutral vehicle, certified carbon neutral vehicle. And then when's the first office block going to open? Carbon neutral office block, built from the ground up with everything carbon neutral in it. And maybe that's this decade. So, and if kind of it's every supply chain is going to end up being carbon neutral, but it's understanding the time frame of that for companies, and really kind of thinking through, okay, so we need to be prepared that in 5 years' time, we have to have everything we do, or we have to have an option for everything we do to be carbon neutral. That's 5 years' time. Oh my God, that's not very far away. Gee, we need to start thinking now about how do we redesign all of our supply chain and all of our operations, and our, it's a massive change for companies.
It is, and that's, I guess that's the point of the event, is to let business know, it's happening regardless. Do you want to be, in charge of your destiny, or be a laggard and I guess struggle to be relevant, financially and from a brand position as well.
And also, I mean, there's the sort of good MBA language. I think it was, I can't remember which one it was, but one of the sort of famous US MBA sort of 1960s authors was survival isn't compulsory as a company. It's you have a choice. You can innovate, or you innovate or not innovate, but it doesn't mean you need to survive. So it's on you. Awesome, John. Look, thank you very much. I'm conscious. I know this is a working day for you in London, and you've got other things to do, and I appreciate your time. As I said, looking forward to seeing you in Feb, when you join us at the next National Cleantech Conference and Exhibition happening in Brisbane.
in 21 and 22. If anyone wants to join John and many others there and continue the conversation, please do so. But John, thanks again. Appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you in Feb.
Yep, great to see you, Nick, and it'll be great to be in a room with lots of people for an event. So
it will be good.
We'll see you then. Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.